What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, then welcome to our little corner of the internet. Today we're going to be watching a video titled The Only Successful Escape from Alcatraz. Let's see what this video is about.
This is the island of Alcatraz in San Francisco Bay, also known as The Rock. If you want to smell what this rock is cooking, the answer is incarceration. This island prison...
I was about to say that this is the prison island, but then I thought about it twice and I was like, what if it's not? But yeah, I've seen this before. Did someone escape from there? I don't know if I remember correctly. I think someone did. I don't know. You know what? I could come up with some master plan. I'm sure, you know, like you gotta get to know the people who work there a little, you know, just a little, you know, friendship going on, maybe, I don't know. Or maybe you could work. Maybe they have like prison workers who go like with the boats to grab something and then you run. I don't know. I'd get out of there. Okay, test me. I'm kidding. I'm really bad at escape rooms and stuff like that. So, but I'm delusional, if that helps.
Was reserved for the worst of the worst. People who had no chance of rehabilitation, but also people whose money, connections, or skill just simply made a regular prison too much of a risk. Yeah, back in the early 20th century, if you had a history of escaping from prisons, this is where you'd wind up. It was, by design, inescapable. But that didn't stop people from trying. In fact, with the reputations that many of the inmates had, escaping the Rock kind of became the ultimate challenge, like climbing Mount Everest or visiting the South Pole. Most escape attempts ended with the prisoner right back in their cell by the next morning, either because they got caught or gave up or made some kind of mistake, usually because they gave up. The whole thing was kind of suicidal. But there were a handful of ingenious attempts that were more successful than others, and one that may have actually succeeded, and it sparked a mystery that still confounds the world to this day. So let's take a look at this legendary prison and find out why The Rock was such a hard place to escape from.
So somebody escaped, never to be found again? That's cool. Maybe. I don't know.
I wrote that. Let's just get it over with.
Welcome to the Rock.
The island of Alcatraz was named by the Spanish explorer Juan Manuel de Ayala, who explored the San Francisco Bay in 1775. And he actually named it the Isla de los Alcatraces, which means...
Sorry, I was not supposed to laugh at that.
1775. And he actually named
Isla de los Alcatraces. Okay.
the
He did well, though.
Isla de los Alcatraces, which means Island of the Pelicans. Probably because there were pelicans on it.
Take me there. I'll start a pelican farm.
It had to be cool to be a Spanish explorer, just like sailing around and just naming things because there's a bird on it. I'm just going to name that. Yeah. Y'all are with me. Later on, the name Alcatraces was sort of anglicized into Alcatraz. In 1850, U.S. President Millard Fillmore issued an order to set aside the island for use as a military reservation. And then the California Gold Rush happened, and the growth of San Francisco led to the U.S. Army building a citadel on the island. And by the late 1850s, the military started housing prisoners there. During the Civil War, the fixture became a fort. Yeah, at one point, a group of Confederate sympathizers tried to outfit a schooner into San Francisco Bay in 1863. They were going to try to raise Union shipping ports, but the authorities foiled the scheme, and the crew were arrested and imprisoned on Alcatraz Island. Several Native Americans were imprisoned there on trumped-up charges at the time. But in 1909, the Army tore down the citadel, and the basement was actually turned into the first main structure that was a prison. The inmates even helped to build it. The island remained in the Army's hands until 1933, when it transferred ownership to the U.S. Department of Justice and their Federal Bureau of Prisons. And that's when the government used it to open a maximum security prison to house the worst of the worst criminals as a way to kind of stand up to the rampant organized crime of the 1920s and 1930s. Prohibition. Alcatraz. It was designed to be a maximum security prison in the strictest sense of the word. For starters, the waters around the island are extremely cold year-round, with an average temperature of around 13 degrees Celsius.
Oh, see, I was thinking about the fact that you could just swim out, you know, but I hate cold water. I would not even dip my toes in that.
That's more than enough to induce hypothermia. And the reason it's so cold is because...
Like, seriously, I would not even dip a toe in there. Yeah. That's what that sounded like. But anyways, but seriously, I can't do cold water. I'm not like a typical Finnish person who goes cold plunging and stuff. Nah. The people who take cold showers, psychopathic. Like, I don't know how you do that, honestly. I could never, ever. I don't care about my health so much that I would suffer like that.
When the wind runs parallel to the California coast, the milder water that's warmed by the sun, it gets sent out to sea. And then cold water from underneath the ocean comes up to replace it. It's a process they call upwelling. So yeah, it's hard to swim in the San Francisco Bay unless you have proper, clothing and equipment on. Otherwise, yeah, you're pretty much going to get hypothermia. By those same winds that keep the warm water out of the bay, they also create strong currents and choppy waters that make it hard to navigate, especially if it's anything small, like a crude, homemade craft. The cold waters also
What if you don't try to swim? What if you just float on top? Just see where the tides take you, type of thing.
make it great for fishing, because a lot of fish come in there, but those fish also attract other things like, great white sharks. But actually, even if the prison wasn't an island, it would still be hard to escape from on land. If it was just, on land somewhere, it would still be hard to escape from. It was known as a prison systems prison, meaning it had like a lower than average prison population, making it easier for guards to keep track of all the prisoners. It also kept the inmates busy all the time on a strict, monotonous schedule where the only things they were entitled to were basically just food, clothing, and shelter, and medical care. Now, if the inmates could prove that they were, model prisoners, they might have access to special privileges like music or art programs. They actually had music rooms there. If they could prove they could follow the rules, they could visit with family members and even have visitors more often. The main prison had only 4 main cell blocks A, B, C, and D. And it was 3 stories tall, and A, B, and C were used for general confinement. D was strictly for solitary confinement. It was a block of completely enclosed cells. The prison also had an open-air recreation yard and gardens for prisoners.
The prison cells look horrible, but I mean, nearly all prisons, they kind of look like that. I don't know if you guys have seen Finnish prisons, though. It's another story. They're not like the typical, just a small cell. Not in Finland. Like, oh, excuse me. You get a whole, it depends on what you've done, no? But in, if you've done some petty crimes, but you're still doing a few years, you get to go to, a place where you live with other prisoners and you have your communal kitchen and you can hang out in the living room area basically. And if you've done a lot of time, you might even get a little house outside basically with a TV and everything. It's kind of crazy. You can have PlayStations, you can work if you want to, you don't have to. It's very chill. Some people actually want to go to prison rather than somewhere else in Finland, which is just wild. I mean, I don't think anyone wants to go to prison, but I'm saying is that sometimes it's even better than to, for example, be on the streets.
With special privileges. And
even though in Finland it's almost impossible to be homeless. I don't know if that statement is true, though. I mean,
this is kind of wild. Approximately 60...
This guy has 2 sorry. Everybody who wanted to see the video is clicking out right now because I'm talking too much. I know, okay. Let a girl speak. I was gonna say he has 2 silver play buttons. Okay, I'll see you.
Families of the staff lived on Alcatraz, including 75 children. Imagine growing up on
Now I kind of want... We need to start posting on the music channel, guys. I'm challenging myself to get a second one.
Alcatraz. Escaping from the prison was no small feat, obviously. Those who attempted to escape, they not only had to navigate the cold, choppy waters surrounding the island, they'd also have to make their way out of a heavily fortified cell block with a small population undergoing constant head counts. It was also surrounded by several layers of barbed fencing with guard towers monitoring every inch of the island. Of course, it's a prison, and people are going to try to escape from it. There were a total of 14 attempts in the island's history. Inmates used every possible method you can think of, from filing down bars to starting riots and overpowering guards. The only men to make it off the island without returning to Alcatraz, as far as we know anyway, was in 1962 by inmates Frank Morris and John and Clarence Anglin. There was a 4th
I've heard about this
inmate named Alan West, but he wasn't able to join the group in time. Morris and the Anglins are still on the U.S. Marshal's Most Wanted list to this day. All 4 men were considered career criminals with escape attempts on the record, which is what put them in Alcatraz in the first place. Morris was a unique guy, even for this crowd. He had an IQ of 133, and he had spent pretty much his entire adult life in and out of prisons. He was sent to...
What? Wait. Oh, IQ of 139. I mean, that's higher than average, no? That's a lot higher than average. Wait, what is the average? Wait, wait a minute. Okay, so average is 90 to 110, I think. So that's way above average. Then why are you in prison in the first place? Is there something we're missing out on? Because if his IQ was higher than a typical person's, why would he do something to get in prison? Like, you know? Like, this person is smart. Okay.
Alcatraz for escaping from Louisiana State Penitentiary, where he was serving a 10-year sentence for bank robbery. He got caught, basically while committing a burglary in 1860, and after that he was sentenced to Alcatraz for 14 years. The Anglin brothers, maybe not quite as smart as John Morris, but they do know a thing or two about escaping from prisons. They spent a lot of time in jails in Alabama, Florida, and Georgia for burglary, and they had attempted many escapes before they actually wound up landing themselves in Alcatraz in 1858. Even West attempted to escape from a state prison while serving time for car theft. So those are our main characters here. Here was their plan. According to the FBI, Morris and the Anglins and West took a whole year to plan this escape. They started by gathering tools and making things they needed from whatever they could find. They even made tools out of tools. They basically MacGyvered their way through the whole operation. For instance, they made drills, like homemade drills, from the motor of a broken vacuum cleaner. They did this to loosen the air vents in their cells by drilling a series of holes around the cover. This was painstaking work, so not only did they have to drill enough holes to break through the wall, but they had to do it quietly, or quietly enough so they didn't get caught. And then they would cover that with whatever they had around the cell during the day so the guards wouldn't notice it. And then once they broke through, they actually found a corridor behind it that they could crawl through, and they went through this corridor to set up a workshop on the roof of the cell block. And they just kind of created this makeshift workshop where they built all the things they needed to get off the island. For months, the 4 of
I've heard this story, but I didn't know they had a whole workshop in the, that's crazy.
them would take turns sneaking into the hidden workshop while one worked as a lookout using a homemade periscope. I mean, these guys thought of everything. They built their own periscope to keep an eye out while they were building rafts and other things. Like, why couldn't they just build a second Alcatraz and just, confuse the guards by having a second Alcatraz? Why didn't they just do that? So they made a raft and life preservers in this little makeshift workshop, and it was pretty ingenious how they put this together. They gathered up more than 50 raincoats and fastened them together to make a 2x4 meter rubber raft and life preservers. Morris got the idea from this actually from articles that he read in magazines like Popular Mechanics. Actually, he got a lot of escape ideas from magazines. He figured out how to make resin from another Popular Mechanics article and how to make your own lampshade. He learned how to use channel buoys to indicate course and navigate hazards from a 1962 issue of Sports Illustrated. Morris really should have had his own Read poster that you used to see up in libraries in the 80s and 90s. Escape through reading. And they stitched the raincoats together by hand with the kind of a fluid plastic that they swiped from a prison workshop, and they vulcanized the whole thing. They vulcanized a raft together with hot steam pipes. And to inflate the raft, they actually used a modified accordion that they stole from the music hall. And on top of all that, they made oars from plywood and screws. So after years of planning and months of building all of the things that they needed, on the evening of June...
This is crazy. That's very smart. Yeah, I don't think I could escape. I didn't think of stuff like that. How do you even learn to use a vacuum motor to make a drill? That's crazy stuff.
June 11th, 1962, they finally put their plan into effect. Alan West wound up staying behind. What he said was that he couldn't get the grill out in his cell and he couldn't get through the thing. Some people think that maybe he chickened out, but that was his story, was that he was going to join them and he just couldn't get through the grill. But the other 3 went on without him. They snuck into the corridor and gathered their gear from the secret workshop. They escaped through a ventilator on the prison roof and then shimmied down a smokestack on the northeast side of the building. They snuck around the island's main water tower and storehouse, climbed over a barbed wire fence, and then launched their raincoat raft on the northeast shore of the island. The plan was to paddle north to Angel Island and then cross the Raccoon Strait and into Marin County where they could steal some clothes and a car. That was, according to Alan West, that was their plan, was to go to Angel Island. But all we know is that they launched from the northeast corner of the island and were never seen again. The next morning, the guards did their usual inmate count, and 3 of the inmates didn't report for roll call. The guards raced to the cells to see where they were, and what they realized was that whoever did the evening inmate count the night before didn't happen to notice that the Anglin brothers and Morris weren't in their beds. Instead, there were homemade dummies. Yeah, they actually made papier-mâché dummies and added hair to them, like real hair that they gathered from the floor of the barbershop. So when the guards raced to the empty cells during the morning count, one of the dummy heads just kind of rolled out of bed and landed on the floor. This is when they immediately started interviewing all the other inmates. That's when they found out that Alan West was actually involved with it. He spilled the beans about the whole plot, and they learned that Morris was the brains behind the whole thing. For days after, the FBI scoured the waters around the bay, hoping to find their bodies or evidence of where they might have gone if they survived the trip. They posted photos of the men all over the area, hoping to find out where they were hiding. Even if they had some help getting out the island and getting out of the area, the agents couldn't find any credible evidence of that.
But were there any stolen cars that day? Anything unusual? What the? That's crazy.
They didn't find much, but here's what they did find. They found one of the makeshift oars 2 days later. It was about 183 meters south of Angel Island. They also found a wallet wrapped in plastic that contained the names, addresses, and photos of the Anglin brothers' friends and relatives, so we know it was theirs. Then on June 21st, agents found one of the inmates' life vests on Cronkite Beach, which is now known as Rodeo Beach. It's 5 kilometers from the Golden Gate Bridge. And then the next day, they found another life vest off the coast of Alcatraz. The vest was still knotted together in the back. There were some potential sightings that they had to follow up on. A Norwegian freighter called the SS Norfjell found a floating body basically 20 miles northwest of the Golden Gate Bridge on July 17th. The problem is they didn't report it until the following October because they had no radio contact at the time. The body was floating face down, wearing denim clothes, kind of similar to the kinds of uniforms that the inmates wore on Alcatraz. But the San Francisco County coroner said that he didn't believe the floating body could possibly be one of the inmates. He said,
Denim? You make the prisoners wear denim? Wow, that is so cruel. If I had to wear like jeans and denim while I'm in prison, nah. Make sure I never do steal or anything. It's just usually prisoners don't wear denim, but wearing like denim jeans would be like the worst case scenario.
Said it wasn't possible for a body to remain floating for more than a month after the drowning. He actually suspected it was somebody who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge just a few days before that. It was a guy named Cecil Philip Herman. He was a 34-year-old unemployed baker who unfortunately took his life. And unfortunately, nobody could recover the body.
Unemployed baker. What?
To determine its actual identity. Another interesting story was a San Francisco police officer named Robert Chechi reported seeing some men take off in a boat just before midnight from Marina Green. He said he saw a pristine white boat in the bay, and at first the boat didn't have any lights on and he couldn't make any faces on it. But then, according to his story, he saw somebody shining a flashlight in the water before it took off and disappeared in the dark. He didn't think much of it at the time, but then when he learned the following day about the 3 men that escaped from Alcatraz, he filed a report. This report fueled even more rumors that Morris and the Anglin brothers had maybe some outside help getting out of the city, but the FBI didn't pursue it further outside of their initial interviews. And they had to do that with a lot of stories because there were a lot of hoaxes and rumors flying around. And this goes on to this day. Actually, in 2013, the San Francisco PD received a letter from a man who claimed to be John Anglin, and the public wouldn't learn about this until like 3 years later. But whoever wrote this letter admitted to breaking out of Alcatraz and that they were dying of cancer. The letter also said that Morris and the other Anglin brother had long since passed away. Experts in the case and a family member said that they don't believe that the letter came from John. A U.S. Marshal also said that comparisons to Anglin's handwriting samples didn't seem to prove anything. And the conspiracies get even goofier from there. There's all these stories that I saw that were floating around about the Anglins visiting their parents' funerals later on in life, because at both their mother and their father's funeral, there were like random people there. One of them, there were guys that were wearing clearly fake beards. And then on the other one, there were a couple of guys that were wearing women's clothes. Now, I mean, those are entertaining and interesting, but like these guys masterminded the escape from the, most escape-proof prison in the world, and they show up at their, show up in drag at their parents' funeral and think nobody's going to notice that. The FBI worked on this case for 17 years, but in that time, they couldn't find any evidence that they could really pin down anyway that the men survived or were living anywhere in the U.S. or abroad. The FBI closed the case on December 31st, 1979, and turned it over to the U.S. Marshals Service, still with no trace of the men's whereabouts. Morris and the Anglins weren't the first or the last inmates to try to escape Alcatraz. There was a guy named John K. Giles. He was actually
I kind of hope that I don't know why, I'm an empath, okay? I really hope that they were okay. I mean, I know they should be incarcerated, but it would be very sad if they, like, died in the attempt. I wonder if one day we're gonna know. Probably not.
Ninth person to try to make an escape from Alcatraz. His wasn't as complex as some of the others, though. Basically, while he was on the island, he worked as a stevedore. He loaded and unloaded the boats that arrived with supplies, and during World War II, the prison was tasked with basically laundering army uniforms. So what he did was he stole enough pieces of uniforms to create a full disguise for an army technical sergeant. Why he didn't just steal a uniform from an army technical sergeant, I don't know why, but apparently he rebuilt the entire thing and did it well enough that it was able to pass. On July 31st, 1945, he dressed in this uniform that he built, and he got on board a ferry through a freight launch below the main deck. And he just kind of started hanging out with the other soldiers and chatted with them, trying to blend in with the crowd. He got on the ferry, they started heading to the mainland. Unfortunately, while he was on the way to the mainland, they did an inmate count back at Alcatraz. Realized two things. One, somebody was missing from the count at Alcatraz, and there was an extra person on the ferry. So the assistant warden went after the ferry on a speedboat, following it all the way to Aidenville Island. And the prison officials ordered the ferry captain not to let anybody out the boat. The captain
That's crazy. Imagine being on a boat, on that boat, and just chatting with people, and suddenly you realize some crazy inmate is in the boat with you.
actually misunderstood the order and let those with a pass off the boat. Giles actually had a forged pass, so he did get off the boat momentarily. But it didn't actually work. The officers spotted it as a forgery, and he kept them in custody until prison officials could arrive. Took him back to the Rock.
The Rock.
Then we have John Paul Scott. No relation. This guy, arguably, could have been the most successful escaped attempt in Alcatraz's history. In December 1962, Scott and his partner, a guy named Darrell D. Parker, which is the most redneck name I've ever heard, they made their getaway from the culinary unit underneath the prison's kitchen. They sawed through some barred windows, possibly by using some violin or guitar strings that they coated with an abrasive cleaner. Hold up, they used an accordion to inflate the raft and a guitar string to cut through bars. I'm starting to think the music program there, it was really just escape training. So Scott and Parker followed a similar path to Morris and his crew once they made it out of the cell block, but they went a little bit further to the northeast of the island, all the way to the tip, basically. And then they swam away on a pair of makeshift water wings. So yeah, they made these water wings out of denim prison.
I mean, definitely the first one was the most elaborate, but these also could have worked.
Shirts that they knotted the sleeves together and then filled the inside with inflated surgical gloves. Parker only made it around 91 meters away to a little piece of floating rock that they call Little Alcatraz. It's just a little rock out there. Little Rock. Scott, however, swam the entire 5 kilometers to the mainland. Hours later, a group of teenagers found him naked and shivering from the cold under the Golden Gate Bridge, and they called the police to report a dead body. The police came to investigate, found out that he wasn't dead, he was actually escaped from Alcatraz. They had to take him to the hospital to help him recover from hypothermia, and send him back to prison.
You blasted kids! Why didn't you mind your own business?
Scott would actually be the last inmate to try to escape from Alcatraz. In March of 1963, just a handful of months later, the Attorney General Robert Kennedy closed down Alcatraz due to basically high operational costs. Today, there's actually a triathlon that is the swimming route, to swim from Alcatraz to the Golden Gate Bridge. So it is something that is doable by world-class athletes. World-class athletes with probably hundreds of dollars of protective gear on to, avoid hypothermia.
See, I'm delusional. I think I could do it, but I tried running a few days ago because suddenly I had the sudden urge to become a runner. I've never ran in my life. I barely even walk. And I was confident that I could do a 5K running for my first. I couldn't even run 5 minutes. It was horrible. I ran for probably 2 minutes, not even that probably, I don't know. I ran a few steps and everything started hurting and my throat started hurting and my ears and my nose and my stomach, I don't know.
But yeah, the mystery around Morris and the Anglin brothers continues to this day. There are reports of seeing them in Brazil. Actually, as recently as just a few years ago, there was a CBS report that came out that there was a photo that had been floating around that was supposedly of them down in Brazil. And of course, there was a movie made about this whole thing back in the 70s starring Clint Eastwood. You can go watch that. I'm sure they didn't embellish anything. But there's a reason why movies get made about it. It's an amazing story. And Alcatraz is a really interesting and unique place. Around 1.5 million people visit Alcatraz every year, which just goes to show people really like cool old rocks. And made a documentary about cool old rocks. In 2024, my team and I went on a unique adventure where we traveled to the oldest and the newest rock formations on Earth. The oldest being the Acosta Gneiss Complex in far north Canada, dated at over 4 billion years old, and the newest being the Big Island of Hawaii, which is creating new land as we speak. In Canada, I took a tour through the rocks with a geologist from the Smithsonian and the host of the Planet Geo podcast, and they helped me to kind of learn about the immensity of deep time. And in Hawaii, I met with the members of the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory and observed them as they did the important work of keeping the people of the island safe. And I came away from it all with a better understanding, of this super weird planet that we all live on. A planet that's ancient, but is constantly remaking itself. Until, it made you. It gets existential, y'all. Strap in. It's called Oldest and Newest Places on Earth, and you can see it only on Nebula. Nebula is, of course, the streaming platform where I and about 200 other thoughtful...
Okay, so...
Here, you might want to check out this video, which Google thinks that's on something that you might like. Google's watching you. They know what you're into. But you can check out that video. You can check out any of my other videos. I invite you to go look at those. And if you like them, I invite you to subscribe. I come back with videos every Monday. This shirt, by the way, is sort of an inside joke from a sketch in a previous video. If you know it and you want it, it's available at the store, laughsmarter.com. Anyway, that's it for today. You guys go out there, have an eye-opening rest of the week. Do stay safe, and I'll see you next Monday.
Eye-opening week. No one has ever wished that. Thank you, sir. That was a very good video, very interesting. I freaking love videos like that. I wonder if they're still alive or what. I want to know. Come clean, guys. Let me know. You can call me, I won't tell anybody. But yeah, thank you guys for joining me for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys in the next video.